No, thank you very much, and greetings to everyone. In keeping to our tradition and practice, I now bow to my right and I bow to my left. And having done so, I now take this opportunity to request delegates to observe a moment of silence for prayer and meditation. Thank you very much. Honorable delegates, before we proceed, I would like to remind you of the following: that the virtual sitting constitutes a sitting of the National Council of Provinces, that the place of the sitting is deemed to be Cape Town, where the seat of the National Council of Provinces is, that delegates in the virtual sitting enjoy the same powers and privileges that apply in a sitting of the National Council of Provinces, that the purpose of the quorum, all delegates who are logged onto the virtual platform shall be considered present, that the delegates must always switch on their videos, that delegates should ensure that the microphones on their gadgets are muted and must always remain muted, that the interpretation facility is active, that delegates, members of the executive, special delegates, and the SALGA representatives are requested to ensure that the interpretation facility on their gadgets are properly activated to facilitate access to the interpretation services, that any delegate who wishes to speak must use the raise your hand function and or icon. Honorable delegates, I've been informed that there will be no notices of motions or motions without notice. Before we proceed on the honorable delegates, I wish to welcome the Minister of Justice and Correctional Services, the MECs, all special delegates, and SALGA representatives to this sitting. We shall now proceed to the subject for debate as printed on the order paper: debate on Human Rights Day, the right to equality, reducing poverty and inequality. I now call upon the Honorable Minister Ronald Lamula, Minister of Justice and Correctional Services, to open the debate. Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Honorable House Chairperson, honorable members, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. South Africa commemorates the Human Rights Month in March annually, an acknowledgement that government has made strides to deepen freedom, democracy, and human rights in our country. It was former President Nelson Mandela, the world's most recognizable human rights symbol, who committed South Africa to the fight for attaining and preserving human rights when he said the following, and I quote, "Thus shall we live, because we will have created a society which recognizes that all people are born equal, with each entitled in equal measure to life, liberty, prosperity, human rights, and good governance," close quote. The ANC-led government, inspired by great leaders such as Mandela, Tambo, Sisulu, Ngoyi, and others, has lived to entrench a human rights culture in South Africa. Equally, South Africans themselves have demonstrated a firm commitment towards protecting the gains of our hard-earned democracy. Honorable members, as you will recall, The apartheid regime deprived Black South Africans their citizenship and abolished their human rights. Apartheid left us with many scars which we continue to heal today. On March 21, 1960, the apartheid regime unleashed the most violent and brutal attack on masses of people in Sharpeville. Their wounding and killing was as a result of them protesting in an absolute non-violent manner and calling for an end of the unjust pass laws and other draconian legislations that the apartheid regime imposed on Africans. As they were chanting freedom songs such as Izweletu, Awaphele Amapas, apartheid police officers opened fire unprovoked on armed protesters, killing 69 people and critically wounding scores of others. The 69 heroes and heroes did not die in vain. The chapter of our freedom is not complete without mentioning them and their contribution. We honor them for laying their lives for freedom and democracy to reign in South Africa. In addressing this painful legacy of apartheid, government has passed legislations which enhances human rights for all South Africans, irrespective of race, belief, creed, sexual orientation, and gender. The Bill of Rights in our exemplary constitution enshrines the rights of all people in South Africa and affirms the democratic values of human dignity, equality, and freedom. The Bill of Rights applies to all law and binds the legislature, the executive, the judiciary, and all organs of state. Government has also established institutions such as the Human Rights Commission to adequately tackle all manifestations of human rights violations. So, honorable members, our commitment to human rights is unwavering. As we continue to commemorate the 25 years of our Constitution, it is fitting that this Constitution was signed into law by former President Mandela in Sharpeville. As we go down memory lane, reflecting how far we've come as a democratic country and deliberating on how we can take our country forward, we commit to comprehensively address challenges facing our people, such as poverty, inequality, and unemployment. We also commit to deepen human rights in this great nation. Some of the fundamental rights in the country are equality before the law and access to justice. The Department of Justice and Constitutional Development has observed that high costs of litigation have potential to deprive the poor access to justice. This is, if we're allowed to manifest, will be an impediment towards the realization of human rights. In this regard, we have, through the Legal Aid South Africa, sought to intervene to ensure that the poor working class South Africans have access to justice.
Minister, just hold on, Minister, a minute. I see the hand of Honorable Mahai is up.
Honorable Chair, I want to profusely apologize for this. I wanted to remind the Minister that we were requested that we be on a video. If you can, I think he forgot to switch on his video. It was just about that matter when I raised my hand earlier. I want to apologize once more to disturb the Minister. Thanks.
No, thank you. Thank you very much. Please, Minister, proceed.
Yeah, my apology, Chairperson. I suspect the video is on. It's just that when I go to the Microsoft Word Office document, I suspect it closes the video, but the video, it's on. Maybe that could be the challenge.
Thanks.
Yes, my apologies to all members if I'm still not visible. I thought I'm visible, even though I might have switched to the office.
We can't see you now, Minister, but please proceed.
Okay, no, thank you. In this regard, we have, through Legal Aid South Africa, sought to intervene to ensure that the poor and the working class South Africans have access to justice. Legal Aid South Africa has, throughout the years, provided professional legal advice and representation to those who cannot afford legal fees, including the poor and the vulnerable. In the current financial year, we've allocated a budget of 2 billion rands to Legal Aid South Africa to ensure that it reaches as many people as possible. We also ensured that the legal representation in pursuit of land justice materializes. This will help to fight the illegal evictions by landowners and farmers. Legal Aid South Africa will now provide services against evictions in the farms to protect farm dwellers and also labor tenants. Honorable members, we continue to appeal to the rest of the world not to perpetuate selective morality. Race should never be a factor when condemning violation of human rights and international law. House Chairperson, it can be correct that certain superpowers turn a blind eye to atrocities in Africa and the Middle East, but unite in calling out for justice for victims of the same atrocities in Western countries. This disparity must immediately be brought to an end. All citizens of the world have equal rights. We call for continued dialogue between those in conflict, and we are hopeful that through negotiations and mediation, an agreement could be reached. His Excellency, the President of the Republic, Cyril Ramaphosa, was forthright when he said, we must rebuild a society that is far better than the one that we came before. We must become a society that is free from poverty, hunger, and deprivation. We must become a society where women and children are free from violence and where their rights are protected. Close quotes. This is a clear line of mind that should preoccupy all South Africans. We should all say it is not yet Uhuru. When we see our people walking long distances to fetch water, children walking long distances to attend school, our people excluded from the mainstream of the economy, our people being landless, people facing hunger and starvation, women sexually violated, abused, and killed. Working together, we can address all these challenges. As government, we have exhibited commitment to fight and defeat the scourge of gender-based violence and femicide, which continue to bring great shame to us. And for that, we want to thank this House for the speedy processing of the progressive legislation to strengthen the fight against gender-based violence and femicide, which the legislations are the Criminal Law Sexual Offences Related Amendment Bill Act, the Criminal and Related Matters Amendment Act, and the Domestic Violence Amendment Act. All South Africans must collectively say enough is enough. Violence against women cannot be tolerated. It is a gross violation of human rights enshrined in the Constitution. We must draw a parallel between the fight against apartheid and the fight to end the scourge of gender-based violence. The Constitution protects all South Africans, especially the vulnerable. Our Constitution is a living document which entrenches and advances human rights. South Africans from all walks of life must, through concrete actions, protect it. As we commemorate Human Rights Month, we unequivocally call for an end to abuse of the rights of the LGBTQI+ community. Our Constitution prohibits unfair discriminations on the grounds of sexual orientation. Through our Supreme Law, the Constitution, we commit ourselves to uphold human rights for all South Africans. This is in line with the clearance called by our forebearers, Oliver Tambo, on the 1st of June 1968. In a statement to commemorate Human Rights Year, he said, and I quote, "Our fight is for justice. We cannot cease until we have won, as we will be in time, and in achieving human rights for all in Southern Africa, we will be making a contribution to the fight for human rights and freedom the world over." Close quote. Tambo understood then that the fight that is won for human rights in South Africa is fight won for human rights in Africa and the world over. And in that way, we will contribute to humanity, the best gift of human rights to the people of the world. The statement by Tambo illustrates that the ANC was always on the side of the people and fighting for their rights. However, today we have yesteryear oppressors and those who were sympathetic to the apartheid regime, arrogantly acting as democrats and safeguards of human rights. They disguise their action as democratic, but upon closer scrutiny, South Africans have unmasked these neoliberals for who they are. People hell-bent on reversing the gains of our democracy and wanting the status quo to continue. These are the organizations who, within their ranks, there is no space for Black leaders to play any meaningful role. They exclude Black communities in areas where they govern and prioritize affluent areas for development. South Africans have long realized that these organizations are opposed to constitutionalism, nor are they want a non-racial society. We stand for services to all the people of our country, irrespective of the color of their skin, racial orientation, or creed. Services must go to all South Africans, and everyone must serve all South Africans, irrespective of their color. House Chairperson and honorable members, irrespective of behavior of organizations we've mentioned above, our constitution is a tool that should unite all South Africans and herald us to an inclusive society. It must enable us for fundamental freedoms and guarantees our rights as citizens. But we need to remember that as we exercise our various rights, great responsibilities lay upon our shoulders. We must respond directly to the World Bank reports that still put us as one of the most unequal societies in the world. The social compact announced by the president is the best way to take out of the difficult quagmire of lack of economic growth and lack of job creation in the country. Collectively, as a social pact and social compact will enable us to achieve the goals of economic growth that will enable us to build an equal society where everyone has access to employment and access to economic opportunities that will help us to achieve economic growth. If we work, all of us together, we can build our nation in diversity. South Africans can only be inspired by ethical leaders who will root out corruption, malfeasance, and maladministration. Corruption, if not tackled, can derail the gains we have made. Let us collectively reject self-preservation and acknowledge that human rights are our lifeblood. Any institution or person seeking to undermine our hard-earned rights should not only be rejected, but must face the consequences of attempting to undermine that which unites South Africans from all walks of life. We have got no option but to work together as a nation to build a country of prosperity for all, with equal rights for all citizens of South Africa. I thank you very much, Chairperson.
No, thank you very much, Minister. We'll proceed to Honorable F. Ngomonyi. Honorable Ngomonyi.
Honorable Chairperson of the NCOP, Mr. Amos Masondo, Honorable Deputy Chairperson, Mam Sylvia Lucas, the Honorable Chief Whip of the NCOP, Mr. Mohai, Honorable MECs present here, the Minister of Justice and Correctional Services, Honorable Lamula, permanent and special delegates of the NCOP, distinguished guests, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning to you all. Honorable Chairperson, we are gathered here today, barely a day after the nation celebrated Human Rights Day. We are gathered here to debate under the theme, the right to equality, reducing poverty and inequality. The province of the Eastern Cape celebrated Human Rights Day at Ntselamanzi, eDikeni, yesterday in Raymond Mhlaba local municipality. The day was dedicated to one of the earliest modern African intellectuals of the 19th and the 20th centuries, Reverend John Knox Bokwe, who played a central role in the establishment of the University of Fort Hare that came into being in 1916. Reverend John Knox Bokwe was also instrumental in the establishment of schools and churches in the province, in the areas of Dikeni as well as Gyoki in the Jogabi district. He championed the importance of education as a human right. We are also gathered here today, Honorable Chairperson, to remind South Africans about the sacrifices that accompanied the struggle for the attainment of democracy in South Africa. Frantz Fanon once said, and I quote, "A generation must, out of relative obscurity, discover its mission, fulfill it, or betray it." Close quote. The generation of Mandela, O.R. Tambo, Kwame Nkrumah, Julius Nyerere, and many others identified its mission as the liberation of the continent from the colonial rule, and I dare say they fulfilled their mission. This generation of ours has a mission to accomplish, and for me, that mission is to eradicate poverty and inequality in our lifetime. Honorable Chairperson, the United Nations Human Rights Commissioner recently published that, and I quote, "No social phenomenon is as comprehensive in its assault on human rights as poverty," close quote. This is because poverty erodes economic and social rights, such as the right to health, adequate housing, food and safe water, and the right to education. According to UNICEF, almost 22,000 children die each day due to poverty. Nearly half of the world's population live on less than 40 rand a day. More than 1 billion people in the world live in abject poverty on less than 25 rand per day, while the richest 1% people have almost half of the world's help. This underscores that there is a huge gap and inequality in the distribution of the world's economy. Thus, poverty is one of the most serious challenges the world is facing today. And poverty in turn is a serious threat to political stability, social harmony, peace, and justice. Sadly, Honorable Chairperson, the World Bank recently published that South Africa is the most unequal country in the world, ranking first among 164 countries, with race playing a determining factor in a society where 10% of the population owns more than 80% of the wealth. As a leadership, we have a responsibility to change this narrative. The Center for Economic and Social Rights argued in December 2008 that, and I quote, poverty is an assault on human dignity, but it can also reflect a violation of human rights when it is the direct consequence of government policy or is caused by failure of governments to act, close quote. I fully concur with that sentiment and support an argument that says a human rights approach to poverty calls for a paradigm shift in how we understand and address poverty. A human rights-based approach thus looks at poverty not as a question of fate, but rather as an issue of justice. This implores all of us to reject the view that poverty is inevitable, but rather look at why poverty persists in this country. This calls for a vigorous investigation and holding of public representatives, administrators, business, and investors accountable for their actions or failures to act that perpetuate and exacerbate poverty in South Africa. As you know, honorable members, that we are guided by the National Development Plan, whose intent is to reduce poverty, inequality, and social exclusion by 2030. As the province of the Eastern Cape, we believe that recognition and eradication of poverty, inequality, and social exclusion cannot be limited to policy and strategy documents. It must be reflected in legislative documents because laws are binding. We also acknowledge that post-1994, South Africa has invested significantly in the social wage package, and that includes social grants, free basic education, healthcare, food security, and basic services. There is still a greater need for collaboration in the basket of services that we offer to make a greater impact on poverty and inequality. As I conclude, Honorable Chairperson, in almost all the provinces, Eastern Cape included, poverty and inequality are two phenomena that are still prevalent. We cannot discount what government has done to fight for the attainment of the freedoms of the people of this country. However, there is still much more that needs to be done. Let us all, even the opposition parties, as we do our work on a daily basis, be inspired by the preamble of the Freedom Charter, which says, and I quote, "These freedoms we will fight for side by side throughout our lives until we have won our liberty." Close quote. Let us therefore defend and advance human rights. Enkosi.
No. Thank you very much. The next speaker is going to be Honorable D. Christian. Honorable Christian.
Thank you, Chairperson. Honorable Chairperson, Honorable Minister, Honorable members, and fellow South Africans, good day. Human rights violations across the world have escalated, and many leaders around the world having the words of Amnesty International, pushed hate, fought against rights, ignored crimes against humanity, and blithely let inequality and suffering spin out of control. Close quote. As we encounter more and more human rights violations across the world, the necessary question is whether humanity has lost its value and essentially what the role of governments across the world is to alleviate these burdens. has a long history of human rights violations. Sadly, the country remains an example of undermining the freedom of others, despite having one of the most robust and celebrated Bill of Rights in the world. South Africa has recently also been named the most unequal country in the world, where the large majority of people in the country are still excluded from socio-economic development based on race, gender, ethnic origin, and disability. Persistent poverty and growing inequalities across the country are stark reminders that the ANC government has failed to protect its citizens and have not created an environment conducive to sustainable and equitable social development. In the past decade, poverty has intensified and the failings of government have been brought to light. It is true that government has embarked on numerous poverty reduction strategies in order to address poverty and inequality in the country. However, these strategies have been largely ineffective. After almost 30 years of ANC government, more than 50% of the population is still poor, and inequality in the country is amongst the highest in the world. These failings have been because of corruption and the inability of government to implement strategy and policies. As a result of this government's inability to alleviate poverty, it has seen the country's entire fabric crumbling. To quote the words of Mary Robinson, open quote, I am often asked what is the most serious form of human rights violations in the world? And my reply is consistently extreme poverty, close quote. Recent crime statistics show that contact and violent crimes are on the increase. This essentially means that we cannot feel safe in our own homes. Despite a freedom charter that aspires to keeping the citizens of our country safe, Bheki Cele and his department is failing the people of this country. In fact, Sunday's carte blanche highlighted police brutality and the inhumane treatment and torture of citizens. Management at police stations came under the spotlight with reports of ill discipline amongst police officials frequently reported but not dealt with. Gender-based violence remains one of the country's most distressing and rampant human rights violations in the country. It remains a profound human rights violation with major social and developmental impacts for survivors of violence, as well as their families, communities, and society. At the beginning of 2021, 128 million rand was pledged towards gender-based violence. Yet, South African experts told Human Rights Watch that despite promises, including in the National Strategic Plan, to address gender-based violence and femicide, the government has still failed to provide adequate funding for shelters and other services. Additionally, police and health departments still fail to prioritize victim-friendly facilities or prioritize medical forensic services, with victims often being treated inhumanely because of the lack of suitably qualified health professionals and lack of facilities. Honorable Chairperson, the right to healthcare in South Africa is a further human rights violation, further impacted by poverty and inequality. Across the country are reports of huge healthcare inadequacies, such as the lack of medication at clinics, hospitals, and mobile clinics, as well as numerous reports of operations not done timeously or limited operating theatre space, while others have died because of patient transport that cannot get them to towns for life-saving treatment. Reports are rampant of members of the public raising concerns regarding the shortage of equipment. According to a report, the long waiting times for medical intervention potentially exposes patients to the development of complications or even loss of life. Public hospitals, in the words of the report, have become a death trap for the poor. Honorable Chairperson, we cannot speak about poverty alleviation and the right to quality if we do not address the glaring right to access of quality education. At the beginning of 2022, it was reported that close to 400,000 learners were not placed in schools across the country, delaying their access and right to education. Additionally, schools across the country are affected by failing municipalities owing Eskom millions of rands and in turn affecting teaching and learning. Water en riooluitdagings loop oor die land heen. Van Noordwes, Mpumalanga tot in die Noord-Kaap sien ons gebarste waterpype. Verstopte riool-infrastruktuur en slaggate groter as die groot gat in Kimberley. Verder hou hierdie probleme risiko's in vir inwoners soos kolera, bakterieë, swamme, parasiete en virusse wat darm, long en ander infeksies kan veroorsaak. Om nie eens te praat van die talle ongelukke op die Noord-Kaapse paaie weens die groot slaggate nie. Meeste munisipaliteite het die inwoners van hierdie land in die steek gelaat. Onbevoegde munisipale rade en amptenare, wydverspreide korrupsie en kaderontplooiing het bygedra tot die spoedige verval en selfineenstorting van dienslewering en infrastruktuur in die meeste dorpe en stede in Suid-Afrika. Agbare voorsitter, die mense van hierdie land is werkloos en getuister met armoede. Landsburgers sukkel om toegang tot kwaliteit onderwys, gesondheidsorg en basiese dienste soos water en sanitasie te kry. Ons het die ontstellende toename van xenofobiese aanvalle gesien. En die regering het daarop aangedring om COVID-19 beperkings te handhaaf, ondanks die negatiewe uitwerking wat dit op ons land gehad het. Mensenhandel is aan die toeneem in die land. Die president versuim om Rusland se inval van die Oekraïne en die gepaardgaande skending van haar soewereiniteit en haar menseregte te veroordeel. As I conclude, Chairperson, we need to protect the human rights and dignity of South Africans at all costs and put the people of this country first. The country is in a rapid economic and social decline. We need a drastic change in government, and the local government elections in 2021 was the indicator that change is on the horizon. The people of South Africa will affect that change come 2024 when the ANC government is voted out once and for all. I thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Honorable Mahlangu. Honorable Mahlangu.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson and Deputy Chairperson of the NCOP, Honorable Minister, the Chief Whip of the NCOP, MECs, special delegates, members, honorable members from Salga, the honorable members of the House, fellow South Africans, Lochan. We undertake this debate when the world is faced with a major risk of global instability. The effects of the conflict of Ukraine and Russia is bound to have far-reaching economic implications for developing countries, which will be impacted by the rise in fuel prices and other basic foods as the global supply system gets constrained. The conflict also brings forth human rights issues, Honorable Chair. And we commend the President of the Republic, His Excellency, Honorable Cyril Ramaphosa, for calling for peace and diplomatic resolution of the conflict. The guns should be silenced so that global development continues, particularly closing the inequality gap between developed and least developed nations. Without peace and harmony between developed and least developed nations, without peace and harmony, I beg your pardon, a better life for the least developed nations will become a dream deferred. The full realization of our human rights in a global capitalist system requires the state to enable all South Africans, particularly the poor and marginalized, the capacity to enjoy their socio-economic rights. The economic aspect of socio-economic rights is an area which our democratic dispensation has not achieved, but has made significant strides to enable its realization. Honorable Chairperson, the Universal Rights Declaration of 1948 had an impact on the liberation struggle in South Africa. The Freedom Charter, which was a product of a proposal by the ZK Matthews. The Matthews was inspired by the UN Declaration of Human Rights. This background is critical in locating human rights in our historical evolution, which also predates the Freedom Charter, such as the African Claims of 1943, which focused on the Bill of Rights. The Freedom Charter states that our country will never be prosperous or free until all our people live in brotherhood, enjoying equal rights and opportunities. Honorable Chairperson and members, this call by the Freedom Charter encapsulates the basis for the realization of prosperity and freedom is based on the enjoyment of equal rights and equal opportunities. This recognizes that in order to enjoy economic rights, the marginalized majority should have equal opportunities. In the context of the majority of the inequality entrenched by colonialism, this is practical terms means that our democratic government should be able to create enabling conditions and empower the marginalized to have equal opportunities to those who are privileged, who are in the main the white minority. Honorable Chair, since the democratic government, the African National Congress has placed the education in the center of developed and redress. This is so because education is a critical element for skills development and the broader human capacity development of the nation. Skills development is also a critical aspect for workers in order to improve their capabilities and to enable them to get more opportunities. The fact that we are in a period of rapid digital transformation and the fourth industrial revolution and changes in the world of work, we need to protect our workers in areas which are not critical as the skills needs of the economy changes. Honorable members and honorable chair, our government and the private sector have a responsibility to ensure that we train our workers' skills of the changing world. It is therefore imperative that even in our education system, we need to develop graduates with relevant skills for the economy. We must aggressively focus on skills development to address the skills gap and skills mismatch, which contributes to unemployment, especially the role of technical and vocational education and training colleges and apprenticeships. Honorable Chairperson, one of the major areas which require strengthening is the integration of learning and practical experience, as this enables students to seamlessly integrate to working opportunities as they would already be exposed to the workplace. Honorable members, in order to transform our economy, we need to incorporate entrepreneurship into our education curriculum at a basic education level and higher education. This is important for economic growth and to develop skills amongst the youth to be integrated into the economy as employers and not only as workers or employees. Honorable Chairperson and members, economic development and transforming the ownership patterns of our economy means that more Black people should be supported to venture into entrepreneurship. Various economic research and statistics have demonstrated that despite medium-sized and large firms having the capacity to create jobs, small businesses have been the key drivers of job creation in the recent years. This indicates that we need to continue to support SMMEs as government, but it is also important that the private sector should also focus on supporting SMMEs. Honorable Chair, developing financing institutions are important if we are to stimulate the economy. We commend the work of government in ensuring that businesses are paid within 30 days of invoicing. and that set aside exists for small businesses. Our government development financing institutions such as the National Development Agency, NYDA, Small Enterprise Development Agency, are critical players in supporting small businesses. Honorable Chair, government has developed centers for entrepreneurships and rapid incubators in institutions of higher learning to foster a culture of entrepreneurship among young people, students, and convert job seekers to job creators. SEDA has also developed the Basic Entrepreneurship Skills Development Programs, which is funded by the National Skills Fund. The program uses coaching to facilitate and reinforce learning and development supporting to emerging entrepreneurs. Honorable Chair, more than 2,000 emerging entrepreneurs have to date been supported through the program. Through the Youth College Fund, government aims to support 10,000 young innovators over the next year, and we should be proud of this. These are notable interventions, Honorable Chairperson, which also requires the private sector to play their role in expanding this type of interventions to create more opportunities. Private sector financing institutions and investors should develop models and programs which focus on investing and supporting small businesses and innovations to grow enterprises and to diversify ownership of the economy. The market concentration of monopolies should be shunned and addressed continuously by the Competition Commission. Honorable Chairperson, human capacity development is a critical aspect to develop and grow any economy. Without the skills and capabilities, economic development becomes constrained. One of the major dangers of the structures of our economy has been to declined in the manufacturing sector to an increase of the service sector and with financial service growing in the main. In conclusion,
Honorable Mashangu, just to say that because of the speakers list, I was not aware that your minutes have actually been increased from 10 to 15.
Can I continue, Chair?
Please.
Thank you. Thank you. As industries adapt to technological changes, the skills and capabilities develops and it enhances the overall human capabilities of the country. The private sector has an important role to play in creating work opportunities. All workplaces in South Africa should be training and developmental spaces. Private sector development institutions also have a responsibility to ensure financing conditions take into consideration of many South Africans who are largely asset poor. Our country has been of the most unequal in the world, demonstrates the structural challenges which impacts income distribution and asset distribution. This inequality affects women beyond race. The patriarchal nature of our society requires government interventions to prioritize empowerment of women. Honorable members, the democratic government has made significant progress in ensuring that we break the cycle of poverty. Today, a child of a domestic worker can become a doctor, engineer, a lawyer, and actuarial scientist and other professions which were primarily preserved for the white community. A village which never had running water and electricity today has electricity. Education is free for the poor until higher education. This commitment and realization by the democratic government demonstrates the primacy of human capacity development. These are the democratic gains of South Africans under the leadership of the African National Congress. Honorable Chairperson, we need to ensure that our workplaces do not discriminate against women, people with disabilities, and LGBTQI plus, IQ plus community. Economic emancipation will always be constrained for the discriminated. Women in workplaces continue to be exposed to sexual harassment and are stereotype treatment, which hampers on the upward mobility of women in strategic sectors of the economy. The low ownership of the economy by women and the dominance of men in the management of Johannesburg Stock Exchange listed companies is a reflection of the system exclusion of women in strategic areas of the economy. Honorable Chairperson and members, the recent World Bank report on inequality in South Africa reflects the need for a deeper and rigorous progress of transforming the structure of the economy to unleash its potential and to create an inclusive society, as inequality contributes to low economic growth and low economic development. The ANC, in its 54th National Conference, resolved on radical socio-economic transformation due to the recognition of the slow transformation and that the vision of the Freedom Charter to ensure the freedom of all South Africans and prosperity is realized. Without guaranteeing the social economic rights of all South Africans, our social stability will continue to deteriorate. As I conclude, Honorable Chairperson, as public representatives in this House, we all have a collective responsibility to rally all South Africans and social partners from business, labor, and civil society to contribute in supporting initiatives which build the capabilities of South Africans. A social compact of a better South Africa has never been this urgent. Honorable Chairperson and honorable members, ngiyathokoza, uZimani Chudubaze. Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Honorable M.O. Mukause. Honorable Mukause.
Thank you, Chairperson of the Council. Chair, the right to equality stands as an important part of South African history. However, our appealing human rights norms are yet to be meaningfully translated into reality. In observing human rights, we are provided with an opportunity to acknowledge its failures. For while democracy has delivered some freedom for South Africans, it's not enough. And not enough has changed for the Black majority of our country. Today, Chairperson, we are still faced with the remountains of apartheid regime that simply refuses to die, represented by the former liberation movement, which is now in government, the African National Congress. And in its formal form, Chairperson, the right to equality remains but a distant dream for Black people due to the triple social challenges of unemployment, persistent poverty, and widespread socio-economic inequalities. Chairperson, according to a new report, which was released earlier this month by the World Bank, South Africa remains the most unequal country in the world, ranking first amongst 164 countries in the World Bank's Global Poverty Database. Yes, Chairperson, it is the most unequal country, and there's nothing to contest, Honorable Minister. That is the truth about South Africa. In fact, we stand far removed from ever realizing equality in the meaningful terms, so much so that any approach to obtain any form of equality should be based on redressing poverty, which has remained one of the biggest problems in South Africa. Poverty is worsened by high unemployment rate, Chairperson, which is the highest amongst youth who currently roam the streets unemployed in their numbers. Many more have abandoned the job search altogether and have lost hope in ever finding employment. They are faced with pervasive poverty and unemployment, whilst inequality continues to thrive. Inequality also manifests itself amongst our youth in a number of ways, the most common being through the glaring disparities of wealth between the rich and the poor. Chairperson, the right to equality is yet to be realized in any meaningful terms, and it remains questionable whether it is achievable in the backdrop of numerous challenges faced, which include the high level of unrest, rampant crime, and a population which is faced by more social ills than it ever has in the history of this country. Crime remains a black problem, and that's a fact. We witness daily murders in Inanda, Nyanga, Kailicha, and many other areas where Black people reside, and this hardly receive any attention from all levels of government. This is because humanity of an African child is easy to dispense with. Poverty, homelessness, poor educational outcomes are all Black problems, and they are directly associated with the high rates of crime. We also remain a nation with a dual economy, a tale of two nations, a tale of two schools, one private, properly functional, where the wealthy send their kids to educate effectively so, whereas our public school stands dysfunctional, poor, under-resourced, and incapable of equipping learners and necessary skills. For the ANC has failed to provide proper public schools with competent teachers, and the struggle around free education remains part of the burning issues in South Africa. Chair, a tale of two health services where private hospitals offer efficient quality health services whilst public hospital remains dysfunctional. And that's where Black people are meant to receive the services from. Without interventions to address this question, Africans will remain pariah in the land of their birth. Chairperson, this is our land, and we are not visitors in our land, but the ANC wants to turn us visitors in our own land. Our chances of achieving meaningful change, which will enable the realization of a just and equal society, remains a dream under the ruling party, which also commodifies public services, which only serves the rich. For the poor are afforded their own level of equality, which differs to that of the wealthy living in affluent suburbs. Chairperson, we are here today faced with the reality of an increasingly repressive government, of a failing economy of millions of Black people without employment and millions more without their land. And the ANC must be characterized for what it is, a violator of human rights in this country called South Africa on behalf of its white monopoly handlers. The dream of an equality society stands far-fetched as the ANC has since 1994 pursued new liberal policies which have failed to transform the economy, so much so that 2 decades into democracy, the Black majority remains on the outskirts of the economy. It is the ruling party chair which has led to the normalization of poverty in this country. And there currently exists no difference between the ANC and the parties which have come before it representing white supremacists for the legacy of apartheid endures. Chairperson, we are yet to see equality being translated into reality. Black South Africans continue to hold fewer assets, have fewer skills, and lower wages, and more likely to be unemployed. In some companies, white workers continue to earn more than blacks do. Even in instances where they do the same work and are on the same level, even if when a black person is more qualified than a white person, they are just remunerated because of their color for being white. Inequalities are passed down from generation to generation with little change over time. Blacks continue to live without land, whilst the elite, mainly the white monopoly, continues to strive. Endorsed by Cyril Ramaphosa and his clique within the ruling party. And once again, on the so-called human rights debate, Chairperson, there remains nothing to celebrate for the Black majority, for the right to equality stand, but conceptually flawed promises. In Sharpeville, Chairperson, you know very well, your generation remains poor, lives in houses which are constantly flooded with water, lives in houses with asbestosis roofing under your government. Are you not ashamed, Chairperson, of yourselves, endorsing such inhumane living conditions? Black people live in squalors under your watch. We will remember you for what you are, Chairperson, sellouts, the day you are no longer in this world. Thank you.
Yes. No, thank you very much, Mkosi. You know, but just to say that the abuse of a platform, to say all sorts of things and so on, really does not assist this house to run its own business. I'm just noting that as you conclude. We'll then move on to the next speaker, Madlope. Madlope, please proceed.
Honorable Chairperson, Honorable Deputy Chairperson, Honorable Minister of Justice and Correctional Services, Honorable members, and all fellow South Africans in the visuals platforms, we greet you this afternoon. We are aware that some in this house and somewhere around the country still get confounded why it is important for the government of the people, by the people, to commemorate the Sharpeville massacre. Since our democratic breakthrough in 1994, the ANC government has enacted new legislations and policies to ensure that the ideals of the Freedom Charter are realized. Day by day, we continue to mobilize South Africans behind their own development to ensure that indeed South Africa belongs to all who live in it, black and white. Having experienced the brutality of the apartheid government, we hold the view and act daily in a manner consistent with the understanding that the central question of South African politics is how the masses of the people fought against the evil system side by side with the ANC, PAC, AZAPO, and many more other progressive forces. The Human Rights Month gives us an opportunity to remember and honor those who made it possible for us to achieve freedom and democracy. We speak of freedom today because of the courageous men and women who marched in Sharpeville and Langa on the 21st of March 1960 for the total abolition of the past laws. It was a day where 69 African patriots were brutally massacred, as the Honorable Minister has indicated, as well as more than 180 protesters who were injured in Sharpeville. Treated as subhuman and a cheap source of labor, their human rights were violated and their lives cut short for demanding to be treated with dignity and respect in the land of their birth. Their sin was to demand the abolition of the diabolic past systems as well as the evil system of apartheid colonialism itself. Their bravery exposed the brutality of apartheid for the whole world to see and united our people's unyielding resolve for freedom. People demanded that apartheid government change its oppressive and inhuman policies. That movement was also joined by the international communities. Some within our shores stood against those who continued to oppose freedom. Honorable Chairperson, it is a fact that we see people who enjoyed good life under apartheid today speaking ill of the African National Congress and people who brought about freedom in this country. In some quarters of this country, some people have the audacity to insult the very same government that came as a result of democracy driven by the African National Congress. As a nation, we made many strides in respect of human rights and ensured it became a reality for everyone. However, the abuse of sexual assault, gruesome murders of women and children, discrimination, abuse of farm workers and dwellers mean we have not reached our destiny. As we commemorate the Human Rights Month under the theme The Year of Unity and Renewal, protecting and preserving a human rights gains, at no stage should we forget about the struggles that were waged in order for us to gain our freedom. It is the right for Africans too to own land. It is the right of women too to own land. We stand here today with no fear of contradiction to say a lot has been done by the African National Congress government to ensure dignity of the people, to ensure that human rights are observed, but we still have a long way to go. It is a right for all people of this country to fully participate in the economy by radical economic transformation. We intend to ensure that the process of economic transformation is fast tracked. We have to see Africans, Blacks in particular, owning the means of production, participating fully in the sectors of the economy, and increase in the number of Black business that are registered in the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. As we also celebrated the 25th anniversary of the enactment of the Constitution, we need to see what good the South African Constitution brought for all people. The Constitution enshrines the rights of all people in South Africa and affirms the democratic values of human dignity, equality, and freedom. We have to judge that by seeing many of our people not depending on the abusers for survival or employment. It is our duty as a nation to strive for inclusive socio-economic development while ensuring that we combat racism, racial discrimination, and all related intolerances. Without any fear of contradiction, Honorable Chair, the ANC government should continue to remind people where we come from. We know that power mongers continue to craft strategies ganging up against the liberation movement to illegitimize it, with some trying to set this country backwards. The founding father of our nation, President Nelson Mandela, put it very clearly when he said, and I quote, to deny people their human rights is to challenge their very humanity. One example is before us all. What is happening in the city of Johannesburg today violating the rights of people. The move to fire over 130 workers is a classic example of human rights violation. This thing must be stopped. That unprocedural act needs to be stopped. This true violation of human rights to say women who were given employment must now join a huge list of unemployment in this country is really unfair and uncalled for. Instead of the city to create jobs that everyone is doing, they open to fire the people. What do you call that? And the racial approach when they are advertising posts is concerning in our country. It is imperative that we continue to promote the vision, principles, and values that inform us that whenever we are and whatever we do, we should ensure that our actions contribute to the attainment of a free and just society, the upliftment of all our people, and the development of South Africa that belongs to all who live in it. This is the vision of the South Africa that is democratic, non-racial, non-sexist, and prosperous, a country in which all people enjoy a better life. We have done a lot of work in pursuit of the vision and principles of our liberation movement that has at all times been based on the age-old values of Ubuntu, of selflessness, sacrifice, and service in a manner that ensures that interest of the people take precedence over our individual interests. Honorable Chairperson, I truly believe that our government has been working in the true spirit of these important values. Today, we are a nation that values of Ubuntu, having learned from such giant of our struggles, Charlotte Maxeke, Lillian Goyi, and many more other heroes and heroines of our country. They always reminded us all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. As government from 1994, we embarked on policies and programs directed at pulling the people of South Africa out of the morals of poverty and ensuring that we build a stable, developed, and prosperous country. Our journey continues to transform our economy. We remain indebted, arguing that not enough progress has been done made to induce the non-racial South Africa that Constitution envisaged for. Our history dictated that we as a nation should rise and create a society that is truly united, non-racial, non-sexist, equal, and prosperous. We must follow in the footsteps of our heroes and heroines who adopted a principled stance against the apartheid legislation that required that every indigenous African male above the age of 16 must carry the dompas day and night and to produce it on a demand by the
To
police.
conclude, Honorable Madlop.
As I conclude, Honorable Chair, our long history of struggle tell us that there are countless other hundreds of thousands who fell before, many more that followed after Sharpeville. Let us all speak in one voice with regard to ending discrimination and equality in our society. The notion that our society contains with our autonomous mechanism which will and can activate themselves to produce conditions of equality cannot be sustained. The achievement of the objective of equality in a manner that generates the least conflict required that, to use a colloquial expression, those who are more equal than others in our society should themselves see the realization of this objective as being in their own interest, as well as therefore themselves join the struggle to eliminate the apartheid legacy. Honorable Chairperson, I thank you.
Thank you very much. We now move on to Honorable Baha. Honorable Baha.
Thank you, Chairperson. Honorable Chair, Honorable Minister, Honorable members, and fellow South Africans, good day. Chairperson, firstly, let me say that today we are mourning. We have lost one of our key icons, a young man, Luzu Kokoti, who worked for the SABC, who passed on yesterday. Yanga umoya wako ungalala ngoxolo ndaba. I start off, Chairperson, with a quote by Helen Suzman. I stand for simple justice, equal opportunity, and human rights, the indispensable elements in a democratic society and well worth fighting for. The Democratic Alliance prides itself as a party that stands on the values that by all means respect and stand for human rights. The Bill of Rights is a cornerstone of democracy in South Africa. It enshrines the rights of all people in our country and affirms the democratic values of human dignity, equality, and freedom. The state must respect, protect, and fulfill the rights as contained in the Bill of Rights. In today's context, it is paramount that when we address human rights, we look at the line between the marginalized society that is being torn apart by poverty under the stewardship of the current government that currently enriches those that are affiliated to the corrupt system of the African National Congress to endure deployment, where the cadre deployment, where the elite is drawn and kind of get all the benefits that are supposed to be benefiting those that are poverty-stricken and are hungry. The central message is that poverty is not necessarily a failure on the part of an individual, but rather caused by the actions or inactions of governments, which are often exacerbated by structural inequalities in our societies. This in turn requires a more rational approach grounded in respect for human rights. Poverty is a serious economic and social problem that affects a large portion of the world's population and manifests itself in diverse forms, such as lack of income and productive assets to ensure sustainable livelihoods, chronic hunger, malnutrition, homelessness, lack of durable goods, diseases, lack of access to clean water, lack of education, low life expectancy, social exclusions, discrimination, high levels of unemployment, high rate of infant and maternal mortality, and lack of participation in decision-making. The antithesis of all the above is what is required to fight poverty and hunger. As a country that is rich with history of inequality, we cannot afford to ignore the past, and yet we cannot stay in the past. History will not justify today's corrupt systems that are not unifying us based on our yesterday. Equal opportunity and skills redistribution is crucial in ensuring that we are all pulling together towards a fair and a diverse South Africa. Poverty erodes or nullifies economic and social rights, such as the rights to health, adequate housing, food and safe water, and the right to education. The World Bank report found that South Africa remains the most unequal country in the whole world. High levels of inequality and low intergenerational mobility act as a brake on poverty reduction. And as a result, poverty is high for an upper middle income countries. Poverty is consistently highest among Black South Africans, the less educated, the unemployed, and female-headed households, large families, and children. In South Africa, the richest 10% of the population own more than 85% of household wealth, while over half the population have more liabilities than assets. We cannot overlook the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic when looking at the poverty it has caused. South Africa's children are at much greater risk of dying from hunger than they are from COVID, and that is more evident in most parts of the country. Nearly 7,500 children under the age of 5 die from hunger each year in our country, and more than 50% of the population lives in poverty. Despite notable gains in poverty reduction post-apartheid, poverty levels have remained consistently highest among women, Black South Africans, people with disabilities, and those living in rural areas. We need to build a country that is safe for all that live in it, irrespective of political affiliation, but by virtue of being human and in respect of our golden constitution. We need to put an end to racial opportunity segregation and strive on building each other as a country for all. We can only do that, though, through democratic values, opportunity, freedom, fairness, and equality. By so doing, we would then have entrenched the feeling that everybody is right, is kind of secured under the constitution of the country. I thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Honorable Baka. We will move on to Honorable N.C. Rakwale. Rakwale.
Thank you so much, Chairperson of the NCOP, Honorable Amos Masondo, the Deputy Chairperson of the NCOP, Mam Sylvia Lucas, Honorable members, MECs present here, colleagues and fellow South Africans. Today's debate provides an opportunity for all of us to pause and take stock on our journey to deepen a human rights culture and advance especially socio-economic right to reverse the devastating effects of poverty, inequality, and economic deprivation, which are the direct consequence of colonialism and apartheid, which constitute the primary focus of my contribution to this important debate. As the ANC-led government, we have made significant strides in ensuring that we indeed reverse the injustices of the past regime by ensuring that human rights of all South Africans are protected. We are continuing to work hard to ensure that the significance of socio-economic rights as an important pillar of human rights to redress the global challenge of poverty is realized. Over the past 28 years, the country has made significant progress in tackling poverty and deprivation. The ANC-led government has built houses, hospitals, and clinics. We have implemented universal basic education and free higher education. Most of our people have access to decent water, sanitation, and electricity in their homes. Society's most vulnerable are supported by an intensive social welfare system. As the MEC responsible for the social development, I can confirm that every month over 46% of the population receive a form of a grant. This is indeed an indication that we are a government which is determined to ensure that it services its people as demanded by the Constitution. Honorable members, as we are all participating in this important debate, let us be inspired by the profound words of former President Nelson Mandela when he addressed the joint sitting of the Parliament during the occasion to celebrate the 10 years of our constitutional democracy, when he stated, as I quote, "Let us never be unmindful of the terrible past from which we come, that memory not to keep us shackled to the past in negative manner, but rather as a joyous reminder of how far we have come and how much we have achieved. The memory of history of division and hate, injustice and suffering, inhumanity of person against person should inspire us to celebrate our own demonstration of the capacity of human beings to progress, to forward, to improve, to do better," close quote. This year, we are commemorating Human Rights Month under the theme, the Year of Unity and Renewal, protecting and preserving our human rights gains. It is during this time when we are paying special attention and honoring of those who made it possible for us to achieve the freedom and democracy we are all enjoying, irrespective of race and culture. They include brave men and women who marched in Sharpeville and Langa on the 21st of March 1960 for the total abolition of the past laws. The previous regime used its power to show its arrogance and perpetuated the heinous act and committed the massacres. We celebrate these historic milestones in honor of the sacrifices made by our heroes and heroines of the liberation struggle. Through their bravery at that time, the international community was able to pressurize the then apartheid regime to introduce reforms in our country. Hence, it is very important that when we celebrate days like this ones, we should appreciate and honor human rights as enshrined in the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa. Delivering the Provincial Human Rights Day message yesterday, our Honorable Premier Chubustan Matavata, said the following, as I quote, "For the past 27 years of democracy and freedom as South Africans and the people of Limpopo, we are successfully ensuring that we work together to address the legacy of our divided past. We are working together to build a country that is invested in the National Development Plan, close quote. As we recall the founding principles of our freedom, we are reminded to always embrace a country which belongs to all who live in it, especially women and children. Honorable members, I must indicate that we will fully celebrate human rights when the vulnerable groups of society, particularly women and children, are still abused and killed. These are the people who, in most instances, are abused by men who are supposed to care for and protect them. Some of them died with protection orders in their hands. I reiterate government's call for a well-coordinated societal effort towards a total fight against women and children abuse. The Human Rights Commemoration will not have achieved its intended goals if our women and children still live in fear. Their fear translates into violation of their rights and a society. We must stop the talk and act against the pandemic of gender-based violence and femicide. We are all reminded that women's rights are human rights that must be protected at all times. Our Constitution makes it clear that all people must equally enjoy their rights. Just yesterday, when he was delivering the human rights message, President Ramaphosa has said the following, as I quote, "Our Constitution calls for the advancement and protection of human rights for all. It does not matter whether they are men or women, adult or children, rich or poor, landed or landless, urban or dwellers, earners or unemployed, workers or employers, citizens or non-citizens. The Constitution obliges the state to protect and uphold these rights and to ensure that everyone's basic needs are progressively met." I must also take this opportunity to appreciate one of the Chapter 9 institutions, which is the Human Rights Commission, which oversees the protection of the rights of all citizens of the country and all who live within the Republic. Just on the 3rd of this month, I met with the South African Human Rights Commission's Deputy Chairperson, Fatima Cohen, on behalf of Premier Stanley Mathabata in Polokwane. The Commission came to our province to lobby stakeholders such as faith-based organizations, traditional authorities, courts, as well as provincial government to pledge solidarity and join hands in the fight against poverty and inequality while creating social cohesion and nation building. We then highlighted the effects brought as a result of the scourge of gender-based violence and femicide, substance abuse, teenage pregnancy, and other social ills. We have since committed that Limpopo province is ready to work with the South African Human Rights Council to promote good values in our society, non-racialism, and moral regeneration through government programs. This, as the Commission is continuing with its solidarity awareness campaign across the country to ensure unity, social cohesion, moral regeneration, and Ubuntu to create a conducive environment for all people to enjoy their rights. On behalf of government, we really appreciate this initiative, as it will go a long way in assisting us to deal with social ills that are having a direct impact on the lives and the well-being of our people. We must be a society where quality healthcare, education, and basic services are provided to our people, regardless of whether they live in a village or in a town or in a city. Above all, we must be a society that recognizes the dignity of every individual, the role of every man, woman, and child in building a better future, as it a promise of our Constitution. As our government in working to rebuild our economy and our society, we must strive to make the promise. Thank you, Honorable Chairperson.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Honorable N. Hadebe.
Thank you, Honorable Chairman, the Minister for Justice and Correctional Services, MECs, colleagues. Honorable Chairperson, the fight for the recognition of fundamental human rights came at a great cost for South Africa. Many people dedicated their lives to one day see a government that would place human rights at the top of its agenda. On the 21st of March, we pay homage to those South Africans who stood for human rights yet needlessly lost their lives to a people that openly displayed hatred of fellow human beings. We must always reflect on this particular incident, the Sharpeville massacre, as a reminder to not become complacent nor take for granted the fight for a constitutional democracy. While some may toy with ideas of regime change, we know that our elders had wisdom in their hunger for democracy. They recognize the need for a democratic system that guarantees the right to participate politically and equally towards a progressive observation of human rights for all. The global COVID-19 pandemic has shown us more than ever how important the guarantee of fundamental human rights are. The absolute need for individuals empowered to be held accountable, and how critical it is to ensure that checks and balances on government power is maintained. We cannot go on accepting a gentleman's agreement that corruption will be taken seriously. The current administration sidesteps from dealing with corruption as it frequently passes the buck on to other arms of the state. Yet, what South Africa needs more than ever is a morally led government that does not take kind to corruption. A typical case in point came about when the whole world was left vulnerable to the COVID-19 pandemic, a time where our individual human rights and freedom were severely restricted. During the early stages of the COVID-19 pandemic, no truer case was made for the shortcomings of human rights in our society. The whole country was subjected to the suspension of their human rights by means of harsh lockdown regulations, Section 21 of the Bill of Human Rights. The fragility of our health system was exposed and proved to be inadequate, as in contradiction of Section 27 of the Bill of Rights. The multi-layered need for a safe environment in Section 24 of the same bill exposed the huge shortcomings in observing the requirements for, I quote, an environment that is not harmful to their health and well-being, close quote. What happened? The rights to sufficient water and food in Section 27 of the Bill of Rights, as we witnessed many rural schools, dwellings and areas suffer the effects of COVID-19 simply because they could not access safe water for sanitation. In contrast, we find that government ministers, through shady vibes contracts, are allegedly implicated in sucking money away from the poor, away from the efforts to access our human rights, and stand by to allow people like this to continue to be popular figure in our communities. The COVID-19 pandemic has shown us how easy it could be for a government to abuse human rights and replace it with rampant corruption. As country citizens, regardless of our differences, we must actively join forces, no matter the personality or wealth, in taking to heart the effects corruption has on limiting our human rights. Whilst dealing with corruption is not a silver bullet, it goes a long way in realizing human rights for all. In closing, the Inkatha Freedom Party honors the men, women, and families who fought for the liberation of our country. We commit ourselves to join with local communities in always fighting for equal human rights. I thank you, Honorable Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Honorable Khadebe. The next speaker is Honorable F.V. Mulombo from Mpumalanga. Honorable Mulombo.
Honorable Chairperson of the NCOP, Honorable Masongo.
Chief Whip.
Malibongwe, thank you very much. Let me extend my greetings to the Chairperson for the NCOP, Honorable Masondo, to the Minister of Justice and Correctional Services, Honorable Lamula, to all honorable members who are permanent delegates in the NCOP, and all my colleagues who are special delegates from the different provinces, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I'm happy, Chair, to participate in this debate that takes place immediately after we have celebrated the Human Rights Day yesterday. This debate is guided by the most profound and relevant topic, which is the right of equality, reducing poverty and inequalities. I want to argue that our country has achieved a lot in defense of the human rights of the people of South Africa. Today, Honorable Chair, we celebrate this day with our heads held high and our faces beaming with confidence because of the progress that the ANC-led government at both national, provincial, and local level has achieved in just less than 30 years. Today, exercising their right to cast a vote and elect a government of their choice, a right which was highly impossible during the time of apartheid. Yes, Chair, the ANC has respected its pledge which it made in 1955 when it formed the Freedom Charter, when it said that the people shall govern, when it said that the land shall be shared amongst those who work it, that the doors of learning and culture shall be open to all, that there shall be houses, security, and comfort, and that all shall be equal before the law, and that the people shall share in the country's wealth. Where in Africa and the world, Honorable Chair and honorable members, have we seen a government achieving what the ANC government has achieved in South Africa? Where in Africa and the world has any organization been able to build the millions and millions of houses for the poor and the vulnerable in just less than 30 years compared to what we have seen in South Africa being done by the African National Congress? Where in the world have we experienced the improvement in terms of the school children, the number of children that are attending schools, that are receiving free education, and the millions that are receiving food or meals at school in just a period of less than 28 years? Our government has introduced a lot of institutions in this country to ensure that we comply and conform by the call of the Freedom Charter, that the people shall be equal before the law. The ANC government has introduced a lot of institutions whose objective is to ensure that they empower the people of this country and they make the people of this country to feel and experience that they are in fact equal before the law. Millions of South Africans today, Chairperson, are benefiting from the social security network, which is part of the respect of their human rights. Millions and millions of the people of South Africa, especially the poor and the most vulnerable, they receive basic free healthcare services as provided for by our Constitution. The implementation of the National Health Insurance today, it's at an advanced stage, and that is aimed at ensuring that we increase the number, the millions and millions of people that are receiving basic, affordable, and accessible healthcare services in our country. The rights of the workers and the most vulnerable in our society are today protected by a number of legislations whose objective is to ensure that we defend the human rights of our people and reduce poverty and inequalities.
All the above achievements, Honorable Chair, they are protected by a progressive constitution, a transformative constitution whose objective is to facilitate change in political, economic, social relations in South Africa. It is a constitution that promotes democracy, that promotes the rule of law and the protection of human rights. It is a constitution that celebrates the richness of diversity of our culture, of our religion, and the beliefs of South Africans, and it affirms that all belong as equals in one nation and a South African nation. It is a constitution that commits the state to respecting, protecting, and promoting and fulfilling the rights as enshrined in the Bill of Rights in our constitution. It is a constitution that aims to transform our society from one that is based on injustice and strife to one that is based on justice and peace. Yes, it is a constitution that we are proud of, that protects the human rights that we're talking about today here. It is a constitution whose aim is to ensure that the livelihood of our people is improved to the better. It is a constitution that depends the culture of democracy and human rights by establishing the Chapter 9 and Chapter 10 institution to ensure that the human rights of the people of South Africa are in fact defended. We cannot ask more because the African National Congress has delivered to the people of South Africa as it promised in a number of policy documents. As part of defending and consolidating the human rights of the people of Mpumalanga, because I am from Mpumalanga, let me indicate that the ANC government in Mpumalanga has declared a war on poverty. We have declared a war on poverty because we believe that no person can feel protected, no person can have dignity if that person suffer from poverty and malnutrition. Ensure that we increase service delivery in municipalities because we understand that the rights and dignity of the people can only be achieved if they get those services that they are supposed to get. We have implemented a radical program to ensure that we grow our economy and create jobs for the people of Mpumalanga because we understand that their dignity will only be justified if they have got job and opportunities. We have begun with the building of 2 new cities in Mpumalanga. The first city is over after the 1994 democratic breakthrough. In this financial year, the people of Mpumalanga would experience dust going up and the ANC-led government building for them, establishing 2 new cities after the democratic breakthrough. We have made a commitment through the State of the Province address that as part of respecting the rights of Mpumalanga, we are going to deliver the first ever tertiary hospital in our province. So, Honorable Chair, when the sun rises, the people of Mpumalanga are hard at work to deliver a better life for all. And we want to make a recommitment as I close, that we, the people of South Africa, recognize the injustice of our past and believe that South Africa belongs to all who live in it, black and white, united in our diversity. We shall respect the human rights of the people of Mpumalanga and South Africa. Thank you very much, Honorable Chair, and thank you very much, my colleagues. Thank you.
Malibongwe.
Our Our next is going to be Honorable T. Mamurobel. Mamurobel.
Thank you, Chairperson. Muzira Shiduro NCOP, Mutusa Muzira Shiduro, the Chief Whip of NCOP, Ntatemo Hawi, Nabo Minister Bane Baba Honorable Lamula, and members of Parliament, permanent delegates, and colleagues. Thank you very much. Chairperson, we celebrate 28 years of our hard-won democracy under very challenging times when millions of our people are unemployed and living in poverty. Although the African National Congress has made substantial advances over the past 28 years to transform the lives of our people, and lot more needs to be done. Many of the structural and systematic features of our economy have not fundamentally changed, Chairperson. The ANC has received a mandate from the vast majority of South Africans to transform our economy in the interests of South Africans. Our country is rooted in human rights and fundamental freedoms. The right to vote and to participate in the national lives of the country has been won after a portrait struggle people laid their lives for. Apartheid social engineering, in conjunction with the global economic order, has resulted in South Africa being one of the most unequal countries in the world. The Wealth Insight study shows that 86% of ultra-wealthy individuals are previously advantaged white South Africans. The majority of those who are poorest are those who were previously disadvantaged, yet substantive equality is enriched in our constitution. Human rights and socio-economic rights are interrelated. One can only fully enjoy the benefits of freedom in a democratic society if one is socially and economically emancipated. Socio-economic transformation is therefore central in giving practical expression to the fundamental human rights enriched in our constitution. Significant strides have, however, been made in improving the equality of our life for millions of our people, particularly the Black majority. The ANC-led government has been hard at work to give effect to our people's right to education, housing, to basic service and healthcare. Government has advanced progressive policies to return land to millions of our people who were disposed by apartheid, and to transform our economy so it benefits all. At the same time, we know that significant challenges remains, Chairperson. COVID-19 pandemic has significantly eroded the developmental gains we have made as a nation and pushed millions of people into unemployment and worsening poverty and food insecurity. The struggle for the total liberation of Blacks in general and Africans in particular has not ended. As Amalka Cabral said, we fight not for ideals, but to live better in peace, to benefit from progress, and for the better future of our children. Chairperson, in a society with deep social and economic divisions, neither social nor economic transformation is possible without a capable and developmental state. The state provides the institutions and infrastructure that enables the economy and society to operate. It is important for the state to play a leading and intrigued role in directing growth in the economy through, amongst others, industrialization and infrastructure investment. This enables the private sector to be crowded in and create the necessary jobs and development. There is no developing country in the world that has left the task of socio-economic transformation and development to the whims of the market. It is through public spending and investment by the state that the environment for the private sector to play a defining role in created. The ANC-led government is building a developmental state
in order to successfully restructure public finances, create an effective tax system, dramatic improvement in service delivery, and increase across to higher education for the poor and working class. Significant investment are going into revitalization of industrial parks and the establishment of special economic zones. In excess of 30 billion in investment have already been made for this purpose. This will give impetus to the resurrection of our manufacturing industry and expand value chains, which will effectively intensify our industrialization capacity and in the process create jobs, reduce poverty and diversity our economy. Chairperson, there are always challenges in the implementation of progressive policy. There will always be a contending forces who wish to see the status quo remain. We believe we shall emerge victorious in the struggle for the transformation and reconfiguration of our society to ensure that it is more inclusive. Chairperson, a fundamental shift in our growth trajectory and building a capable developmental state will be achieved only through a transforming the structure of the economy operation. Vulindlela was established as a joint initiative of the presidency and the National Treasury in October 2020 in pursuit of this imperative. Is aimed to support departments and entities to accelerate the implementation of reforms that will unlock growth and create jobs. 5 priorities will drive the transformation. These 5 priorities, Chairperson, is energy, which will ensure that there is competition in electricity generation with adequate supply to meet demands, bringing an end to load shedding. The independent grid operator will buy electricity at the lowest price from Eskom and private generators. The second one, improving and developing our freight logistics system, which will make the sector more competitive and efficient, which will have the results of more jobs in export industries, lower cost for all of the goods and that will buy, and less congestion on our highway. The release of the spectrum will reduce data costs, increase broadband speed and quality, and expand the network reach across the country, including in deep rural areas, Chairperson. The successful auction of spectrum took place just this month within the deadline set by the President in 2021. Develop stronger institutions in the water sector to improve maintenance of our water infrastructure, fewer disruption to water supply, and long-term water security in the face of climate change. The reforms to the visa system, which will ensure that we can access skills and resources that our economy needs while protecting and increasing the employment of South Africans, especially in low-skilled and semi-skilled work. Chairperson, the African National Congress is hard at work to bring about the necessary structural changes to our economy in order to create a more inclusive economy and planting the seeds of growth in the soil of consensus to yield the fruits of jobs and opportunity. Our economy, however, remains highly concentrated with a few monopolies and oligarchies dominating the commanding height of our economy. This is mainly due to the fact that the apartheid regime actively promoted national champion in different sectors by developing industrial state-owned enterprises, monopolies, and agricultural cooperatives that were later privatized and condoned industry cartels protected the self-sufficiency and economic interests of a small minority. This has created barriers to entry and decreased participation by SMEs in the economy, Chairperson. According to the Competition Commission, out of some of 44 sectors in our country, 69.5% are highly concentrated, with 40% being moderately concentrated and only 9.7% of sectors being unconcentrated. This is a real cause for concern. It is imperative that government, the Competition Commission, and other sectors of civil society work hard to break up monopolies and the high levels of concentration and low levels of participation in the economy. We further have to provide SMEs with the necessary support to ensure their growth and sustainability, Chairperson. The implementation of Native Lands Act of
honorable member.
Deepo says, as I conclude.
Sorry. Yes, no, you have 15 minutes.
Yes,
Five more minutes. Sorry.
Yes,
Please
that
proceed.
Deepo says, yes, Chairperson, thank you very much. The implementation of Native Lands Act of 1913 that dispossessed Black indigenous South Africans of their land fermented the solid socio-economic injustice that lives with us today. Scholars across the board are in agreement that effect of this piece of legislation was devastating for the Black, and its effects are felt to this very day, Chairperson, more than a century later. The ANC government has made significant strides to redistribute land to dispossess Black South Africans to correct this injustice. However, this has been far from adequate. Not enough productive land has been transferred into the hands of Black farmers and producers. Support programs for new farmers have largely been ineffective. It is important to help naysayers and prophets of doom understand why land redistribution is important for creating an inclusive economy. In general, growth in agriculture is 2 to 3 times more effective in reducing poverty than an equivalent amount of growth generated outside agriculture. The advantage of agriculture over non-agriculture sectors in reducing poverty is largest for the poorest in the society, ultimately disappears as countries become richer. Growth in agriculture can also extend to other welfare outcomes such as food insecurity and malnutrition. Radical land redistribution is needed, Chairperson, now more than ever, as it will give impulses to accelerate participation in agriculture and agro-processing value chains, as this is one of the crucial economic sectors to transform the economy through sustainable employment creation, business opportunities, invest attraction, and growing our export base. We have to ensure that there are effective programs to improve and increase training and support measures that will ensure the success of beneficiary of land reform. Chairperson, transformational imperatives are embedded in our Constitution. Section 217 of the Constitution places an obligation on the state to pursue policy legislation that seeks to correct injustice of the past. Since the promulgation and implementation of our broad-based Black economic empowerment policies, we have been able to open opportunities for many previously disadvantaged individuals. The Black middle class has increased substantially since the dawn of the democracy. Much more needs to be done to transform the racial character of our economy to make it more inclusive and reflect of the democratic in our country. State procurement should be enhanced as an empowerment Chairperson, as the empowerment lever, as it represents a significant market for business, particularly small enterprises, and should be viewed as a key instrument for empowering emerging Black businesses. It will be remiss of me if I did not address the implication of the Constitution Court judgment on the public procurement regulation of 2017. It must be understood that the judgment that has not been done away with our Black empowerment policy or preferential procurement legislation policy or preferential procurement, as many would want us to believe. In actuality, the court pronounced on the importance of empowerment and transformational legislation as effective tools to realize the objective of Section 217 of the Constitution. The court determined that the power to determine the preferential policy rested with organs of the state and not the Minister of Finance, as per the precautions of preferential Procurement Policy Framework Act. Our organs of state should continue determining procurement policies that empower Black-owned enterprises. As the African National Congress, we will not waver in fulfilling our historic mandate of changing the lives of our people and transforming the structure of our economy. The dawn of COVID-19 on our shores has undermined the gain we have made thus far and compound the challenges of our country. Another challenge confronting us is a concentrated effort of undermine and derail our democratic violence and disruption, as well as attacks on both public and private infrastructure. These attempts are an insult to those who laid down their lives for the interest in our constitution. We cannot allow these to continue.
Please conclude.
We call upon all, as I conclude, we call upon all patriotic South Africans to support government in defending the gains of our democracy and advancing socio-economic transformation. I thank you, Chairperson. Ndori wa Mchimbiza Mshumu.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is going to be Honorable S.G. Fernandez. But as Fernandez prepares himself to take the podium, I will now hand over to Honorable Winning Wenya to preside. Honorable Fernandez.
Honorable Chairperson, may I proceed? Honorable Chairperson, the Honorable Minister, all MECs, special and permanent delegates to the NCOP, members of provincial legislatures, representatives of local government, members of the media, fellow South Africans, good morning, goeiemorgen, molweni, assalamu alaikum. As I reflect on the Human Rights Day that just passed and the personal sacrifices that so many people made in pursuit of South Africa's freedom, I realize that we are not short of courage in this beautiful nation. It exists in every family and community and in every village and town. Yet, yesterday's celebration of Human Rights Day was a bittersweet one for many South Africans. Honorable Chairperson, for a long time, South Africa appeared set to avoid the political chaos that plagued many African countries in the post-colonial era. However, that exceptionalism came at a cost. It allowed the ruling African National Congress Party the liberty to indulge in profound denialism and create a narrative of steady progress, even as corruption engulfed its ranks and its governments continued to fail on delivering basic services to the poor. It is hardly a surprise that more than a quarter of municipalities are nearly bankrupt and state-owned entities are struggling due to corruption and poor governance. What is more concerning, Honorable Chairperson, is that billions of rands allocated to the COVID-19 response and relief efforts were plundered through dubious procurement practices. Citizens, understandably, are livid and anger is pouring out onto the streets. Honorable Chairperson, we find that under the leadership of our current national government, work opportunities are far and few between, with an estimated 30 million of 56 million South Africans living below the poverty line, according to the World Bank report. Currently, 9.9 million people do not have jobs or have given up hope of finding a job. And in order to address the pandemics of unemployment, poverty, and gender-based violence, amongst others, we need a capable state. Honorable Chairperson, in the Western Cape, we do things differently. Under the leadership of Premier Alan Winde, the Western Cape government adopted a recovery plan last year in promotion of the rights and dignity of citizens living in the Western Cape, working day to day to address the COVID-19 pandemic and doing our best to keep our residents safe from its devastation. we quickly concluded that we needed a responsive plan. Consequently, we formed new partnerships with civil society in the wake of the myriad of negative impacts of COVID-19 and appreciated anew the importance of partnerships, especially public-private partnerships. We came to the conclusion that our strategy was as valid as before. Malnutrition in the province existed before COVID-19, only it is now more severe and requires even more of our focus. Unemployment was always a challenge we were determined to confront, and now we have an even greater determination. Crime and violence were intolerably high and needed to be tackled. And with expectation that it is going to become worse, we are even more determined than ever to address it head on. Honourable Chair, this plan is a recognition of and a response to these pandemics. It identifies the problems that require an urgent whole of society response in order to create jobs, foster safe communities, and promote the well-being of the residents of the Western Cape. It is being pursued with the same energy and collaborative approach that created the coalition that came together to fight the dreaded coronavirus. The recovery plan is based on four equally important themes. The first theme being COVID recovery, as the pandemic is still with us. Our second theme is safety. This is the overarching theme for the provincial strategic plan, and it is equally relevant going forward as it is inextricably linked with well-being, as safety cannot be achieved if basic human needs are not met. Honourable Chair, when we set out to implement the Western Cape Government Safety Plan, having more boots on the ground was only one of the plan. We, of course, need more law enforcement officers in crime hotspots, especially given the national government's under-resourcing of the province. But we also need a violence prevention interventions that prevent violent crime from happening in the first place. We are the only province to establish a violence prevention unit within the Department of Health, which provides evidence that is data-based to support our efforts to fight crime in the Western Cape. The third component of our recovery plan is that of jobs and economic recovery. The economic impact of COVID-19 has been severe. We can only recover if our economy grows and if citizens are able to generate an income. The significant job losses during the pandemic has meant that this delicate balance has been damaged, and many other areas that determine progress has worsened because of it. Honourable Chair, during Premier Windy's State of the Province address, he quoted the following: "Our single biggest priority in the year ahead must be to create an environment where private sector creates jobs and lots of them. We must fight back against our pandemic of joblessness, because a job puts food on the table, a job keeps a child in school, a job keeps a young man off the streets and out of a gang. A job can mean a happier, healthier, and longer life for you," unquote. The Western Cape government has prioritized infrastructure-led job employment over the MTEP, which will form the basis of tackling safety and improving the well-being of citizens of the Western Cape. Our fourth component of our recovery plan is that of well-being. A government must ensure that the basic human needs of its citizens are realized as guaranteed in the Constitution. Honourable Chair, a concept that is central to the above four themes is dignity. The citizen is at the center of everything that we do as a government, and that we deliver and how we deliver it. We must uphold the dignity of every individual household and for members of the community. The Wellbeing and Dignity Workstream has established various working groups, and in the interest of time, I will mention just a few of the key ones. We have established a gender-based violence workstream to address the scourge of gender-based violence that has spiraled out of control as the justice system fails many victims. We saw the debacle with the DNA. We see rape kits or the lack of rape kits at police stations, and so I can continue. We have established a provincial faith-based forum which plays an integral role in connecting our whole of society approach. We have established a dedicated youth forum to focus on the needs of youth and especially the needs of youth not yet in employment. And to address poverty and malnutrition, we have established a working group that focuses on nourish to flourish. This working group is led by the Department of Agriculture. It works very closely with the EDP, which is led by Professor Andrew Borain, and that is the Western Cape Food Forum. And the Food Forum embraces all of civil society, and it is the connect between government and civil society. Honorable Chair, food and nutrition insecurity are growing threats to our democracy. The NIDS-CRAM findings have shown that increased levels of household food insecurity that began with COVID-19 are likely to persist over the medium term. Whilst hunger is a symptom of the jobs crisis, malnutrition and poverty can't be solved without addressing the food system and how it is shaped by other key systems. In our Dignity and Well-being Work Group, the Food Forum acts as the link. They meet every second week. They have launched a newsletter. We have engaged key stakeholders.
As you conclude.
Thank you, Honourable Chair. In an effort to conclude, I would like to address the Honourable Minister through you, Chair, and all Honourable members on the platform to say that to address the basic needs as enshrined in the Constitution, we must act swiftly and decisively to address corruption, because it is corruption that is depriving our citizens of their basic rights as enshrined in our Constitution. I thank you.
Thanks very much, Honourable Member. Honourable members, we continue with our speakers list. I'll now call Councillor F. Boltman Salga. Salga.
Thank you very much, Honorable W. Ngwenya, for the opportunity. Let me quickly get to my speech here. Yeah. Yes, Honorable Chairperson Bob Masondo and Honorable Deputy Chairperson NCOP, Honorable Mayor Sylvia Lucas, the Honorable Minister Arla Mula, the Honorable Chief Whip of the NCOP, Honorable MECs and delegates from all provinces, Honorable House Chairperson, Committee and Oversight, Honorable House Chairperson, members, support and IR, Honorable Permanent Delegates, Honorable Special Delegates, fellow South Africans, good day. SALGA appreciates the genesis to freedom and attainment of democracy in South Africa through many mechanisms, and for this day's purpose, outside peaceful resistance in the form of protests, marches, and demonstrations, with masses mobilized to action by lived experiences daily from an unjust apartheid system that terrorized them and undermined their very fundamental human rights and dignity. The hallmark of such was the Sharpeville massacre on the 21st of March 1960 that saw 69 people, including women and children, murdered in cold blood and 180 of them wounded. They were unarmed and defenseless. This because of a simple, peaceful demonstration for a free movement in the country of their birth, in protest of compulsory carrying of amapasi, Human Rights Month is commemorated to remind South Africans about the sacrifices that accompanied the struggle for the attainment of democracy in South Africa. We reinforce our commitment to the Bill of Rights as enshrined in our Constitution, guided by the theme for Human Rights Day, Yaga 2022, the freedom of movement and residence. These rights, Chairperson Mengwenya, these rights include equality. Everyone is equal before the law and has the right to equal protection and benefit of the law. Human dignity, everyone has inherent dignity and have their dignity respected and protected. Freedom of movement and residence, everyone has a right to freedom of movement and to reside anywhere in the country. Language and culture, everyone has the right to use the language and to participate in the cultural life of their choice. I've heard earlier someone was reading a speech, and at the end of that speech, she spoke in Afrikaans, and I mean, that is also the right. Life, everyone has the right to life. Whether we are at the workplace, within the communities, at schools, or with our partners and children, we all need to demonstrate the kind of responsibility that we would like to see in our country's future. We need to intensify the implementation of these progressive policies in order to achieve the ultimate objectives of genuine socio-economic transformation. Government has identified the triple challenges of poverty, inequality, and unemployment as militating against the improvement and upliftment of the lives of our people for the better. The fact that many people, especially young people in the group of the historical disadvantaged communities, remain unemployed and therefore not active in the mainstream economy is a serious indictment on our political system currently. We need to ensure that the country's economy can embrace the diversity of skills and competencies that our people possesses. We call on all South Africans to use Human Rights Month to foster greater social cohesion, nation building, and a shared national identity. It is our duty as a nation to strive for inclusive socio-economic development